So, welcome to the gift of psychosynthesis. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Allan Frater, who is a psychosynthesis psychotherapist, trainer at the Psychosynthesis Trust in London, and author of this wonderful book, The Act of Imagination, Psychosynthesis Psychotherapy in Experiential Context. And you're also the author of Walking Dreams, Imagination in Psychotherapy and Everyday Life. Welcome, Alan. It's so good to have you. And yeah, I love your book. And yeah, I'm looking forward to talk to you about the book and about your journey. And yeah, so welcome.
Lovely. That's really nice. It's nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation. And always good to speak to people who've read the book,
Mm.
share the book. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really interesting. It was I had to I invited myself to take the hat of the interviewer to just absorb the book.
Nice.
And yeah, I'm really enjoying it, enjoyed it. I wanted to ask you, Alan, to start with. We're going to talk about the book, but I'm curious to hear about your journey, how you came to psychosynthesis, and yeah, I know you were in the engineering
Uh,
profession at first,
yeah, I
and
mean,
you were.
well, it depends how far back you go,
Mm,
what's the causal factors. But I mean, the proximate cause was I was a depressed Buddhist.
mm,
I was ordained in 1999 as a Buddhist on a 4-month retreat in the mountains of Spain into a Buddhist order. And I lived a very fulsome Buddhist life, living in Buddhist communities and working in Buddhist businesses and going on retreats and things, teaching, meditation, etc., etc. But um, there were some people in that community
mm,
who had been trained in psychosynthesis and were training in psychosynthesis. Um, Richard Huson, who trained at the
mm,
Institute, was the main source of inspiration for me to get involved. And I thought if I could, I think what I needed was a more bespoke
mm,
application because I think the Buddhist teachings were great, but they were like, be mindful. Mindfulness is good.
yeah.
Be ethical. Ethics is good. Study the wisdom teachings. Wisdom's good. Um, I just had an intuition that psychosynthesis and going into therapy would
Hmm.
give me a more a more detailed map of my particular uh, weirdness. So that was one strand. The other strand was I was attracted to psychosynthesis. I think because it had a space
Hmm.
for, there's lots of people that turn up from spiritual backgrounds, Buddhism, Catholicism, shamanism, Kabbalah, all sorts of
Hmm.
backgrounds, feel that psychosynthesis has a place for that, which it does do.
Yeah.
And I was also attracted to the imagination side of
Mm,
psychosynthesis. Even from back then, I could see that it had a place for imagination, and that was definitely very attractive to me. As I think we might talk about, I mean the
hmm.
clues in the name of the book. Both my books
Yeah.
are about imagination, and both my books are an elaboration of the role of imagination in
Mm,
psychosynthesis. So that was attractive to me as well. So for different reasons, I turned up in 2003 at the Psychosynthesis
mm.
Trust.
Well, 23 years later.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I can relate to lots of things you mentioned. Yeah. I first came to the training due to a crisis of meaning, but
Mm,
the background motivation was this experiential side of it. About the Buddhism practice. Even to this date, I'm still part of a philosophy group at the School of philosophy and science. And it's lovely. It's very deep, but it there is lots of parallels with psychosynthesis. But the psychosynthesis training, really invites you to go into um, the very experiential part of it. And I can relate. I'm curious, what is style of Buddhism you? We have where I live, we have the Kadampa Center here in Ulverston. Mm,
I got ordained into, it was called the Western Buddhist Order back then.
mm,
It's changed its name since then, but yeah, it was the
mm,
Western Buddhist Order. So it was the idea was that it was founded by a guy called Sangharakshita. He was an Englishman that
mm,
traveled to India and learned from all sorts of amazing
yeah,
teachers, and then brought that back. So the
yeah,
basic idea was, how can we practice Buddhism in the
mm,
West? How can we, you know, rather than pretending
yeah,
to be a Tibetan person, don't pretend,
yeah,
be a Scottish person, be an
yeah,
English person,
exactly, exactly. Still,
and and
yeah,
and and it was an inspiring and creative project
mm,
to experiment with what
mm,
it would mean to live a Buddhist life in the West. So I
mm,
didn't wear
yeah,
robes, I didn't shave my head, I wasn't a monk as such, but I was an ordained practitioner, so I was committed. Um, and yeah, it was a very creative, inspiring time. Yeah.
yeah. And on the back of that as well, you talk a lot about, not a lot, but you quote a Sajoli, and you bring a Sajoli to life in your book in many ways. And I felt like you honor his presence and his legacy. And this, what you're describing about Buddhism and psychosynthesis, there are lots of parallels. And if you could talk a little bit about what a
Mm.
Sajoli, yeah, what was the idea, or in your point of view, of how he brought psychosynthesis to be with lots of different influences.
And maybe why that attracts or includes a
Mm,
spiritual background.
mm,
Well, I think Sagioli's one of his main insights was to recognize that spiritual experiences, meditative
mm,
experiences, aesthetic experiences, altered states of consciousness, heightened states of consciousness, these were really important experiences. These were not
mm,
just a distraction or a fantasy. These were part and parcel of what it means to be a
mm,
healthy human being psychologically. Um, and therefore, he wanted to include that potential, if you like, in how he understood
mm,
um, psychology, and therefore he, in a way, went beyond or complemented what he saw as Freud's
mm,
understandable, but in retrospect, perhaps
yeah.
overemphasis on what goes wrong in human psychology
Mm,
and neurosis, depression, anxiety. Psychosynthesis definitely includes a perspective on all that, but it situates it
mm,
not just in respect to the past and looking back to childhood. It also has an understanding that allows it to see psychological disturbances, symptoms, anxiety,
mm,
depression, etc., addictions, etc., not just as a sign of brokenness or something having gone wrong because of what went wrong in the past, but maybe just the kind of disturbance, the perhaps inevitable disturbance, the birthing pains, if you like, of a
mm,
change process, of moving forwards in your life and becoming more of who you are. So Sajuli writes about a spiritual crisis,
mm,
which spiritual sounds good, but the crisis part would be the difficult part where
mm,
we don't, like you mentioned, a crisis of meaning. So that would be
mm.
um, part of a spiritual crisis. You're beginning to let go of your old sense of meaning, which is inadequate, but
Yeah.
then you're in a hiatus, you're in an in-between state where you've not quite found a new sense of meaning.
Mm,
Um, So psychosynthesis, what I love about it is helping people to move forwards in their lives, not just and not to understand these disturbances, not necessarily as a sign that something's gone wrong, like you're a
Yeah.
machine that's been broken and we just
Yeah.
need to repair you, but that you're well, my favorite analogy these days would be a forest. So the forest, maybe somebody drives a road, builds a road through the
Mm.
forest. Maybe an invasive species turns up. Maybe there's a drought. The forest has things done to it, or unexpected events or experiences arise in the forest. That doesn't mean the forest's broken. It might mean that the forest struggles and it'll take time, but it will bounce back and it will adapt.
Mm.
It will change as a result
Yeah.
of the invasive species or the drought or the road, and eventually work out a new homeostasis or a new system.
Mm.
So it will self-organizingly change
Yeah.
and adapt. And life's like that. Life's always coming at us. There's new experiences, new people, and new opportunities.
Mm.
And we need to adapt and move forwards in our lives, like the forest does. And then the forest's still the forest, but it's a changed forest. And I'm still Alan,
Hmm.
but I'm a changed Alan. And I like that forward direction that you get, that optimistic sense of renewal, constant renewal in psychosynthesis. And also how it moves you away from thinking, I'm broken. And then
Yeah.
it also frees you up from the impossible project of trying to turn yourself from like a broken down Ford into a shiny red Porsche,
Mm.
as if change means you become somebody
Yeah.
completely different, because you don't. You
Yeah.
don't.
No, you want to be to change into what you really are, what you're meant to be, the forest.
Yeah.
Yeah, with its ability to self-generate, self-regulate, or no, or
And I think
forgot the word. Yeah.
and I think there's one little thing to add in, which is that the spiritual crisis might mean that you have a breakthrough
Mm.
experience. It might not be that you're anxious
Mm.
or depressed. It might be that you actually have a heightened sense of self or an expanded sense of
Mm.
connection or wonder or beauty.
Mm.
And how to integrate that into your life,
Yeah.
how to build a new sense of self around such experiences
Yeah.
is very much what psychosynthesis is all about.
Yeah.
So again, because that can overwhelm people or they can think something's
It
gone
can. Yeah.
wrong, um, and struggle to make sense of what's happened.
Yeah.
So psychosynthesis very much does that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it challenges mostly people who can be very mind oriented and wanted to be fixed and get the forest back to what it's supposed to be and quick and or the shine Porsche or yeah. Yeah. No, I love the metaphor of the forest, and and I feel that is really great what Sajali did as well, where he was actually, for people who don't know who he is, he's Roberto Sajoli is the founder of Psychosynthesis, and he was a psychiatrist, an Italian psychiatrist, and a psychotherapist, and he was also contemporary of other well-known therapists like Carl Jung and Freud, as you mentioned. And he had a relationship with Freud, and they exchanged letters and talk about yeah.
He had a
Mm,
strong relationship with
mm,
Carl Jung mainly.
yeah.
They corresponded throughout their life. They had a lot in
Mm,
common. They both in different ways moved on from Freud. But and
yeah.
I don't think it's actually abandoned what he got from Freud. It's just he wanted to build something
Yeah.
new,
Mm,
which I think says something about psychosynthesis. I think
yeah.
because there's this big emphasis in this book that we're talking about
Mm,
today that there's no orthodoxy in psychosynthesis. Now, there is Freudian psychoanalysis is a discipline.
mm,
You could say that psychosynthesis is a field. Psychosynthesis isn't a
mm,
discipline. And I think that's quite a nice distinction. Um,
yeah.
a discipline is we do it like this. This is
Yeah.
there's a framework. Psychosynthesis is much more open than that. It's not a discipline, it's a
Yeah.
field of practice and community. And Sajuli says there's no orthodoxy in psychosynthesis. Everyone understands and practices it in their own way, and it's for people to decide what's best for
Mm.
them. And he doesn't even say that his original presentation is
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
orthodoxy. And he
Mm.
positively encourages people, you and me, and people watching this perhaps,
Mm.
to develop psychosynthesis,
Yeah.
to um, allow it to move forward. So he talks about his presentation as analogous to psychosynthesis being in an adolescence. So it's quite a young stage. And yeah, I really ran with that in the book and increasingly through the writing process felt a sort of freedom to
Yeah.
follow through on his wishes in that regard. Based on a reading of what he'd said,
Yeah.
um, allow psychosynthesis to grow and develop and adapt to the new world that it finds itself in.
Mm. Yeah. There is a famous quote about Freud being interested on the basement and
Mm.
Sagioli being interested in the whole building. And also even him encouraging he handed in psychosynthesis to new practitioners. And we had Molly Young Brown in the channel, and we interviewed her, and she was one of his students when he was still around. He died in 1974, and Molly Young Brown was one of his students, like many others who are still, practicing and very active, like Roger Evans and Piero Ferrucci and Diana.
Diana
What's her?
Whitmore, Tom Yeomans.
Yeah, yeah. And Molly Young Brown said that he told her, go and build on upon it,
Yeah.
just create and expand. He didn't say like this is it. Yeah.
I mean,
Mm,
she wrote the foreword to the
yeah.
book, Molly Young
Yes,
Brown.
she did.
She wrote, and she
Yes, she
says
did.
she makes the
Yeah,
point that you just
yeah,
made in the foreword.
yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, I was really grateful to her
yeah.
that I just reached out to her.
Yeah, and she's very
Um,
approachable. She's
She
yeah,
was my first
very
choice.
yeah,
I like the way she talks about
yeah.
psychosynthesis. She's inspired by eco-psychology and
Mm,
systems
yeah,
theory,
she
like I
is.
am. And
Yeah.
I was aware in writing the book that if it was to go out into the world and do the work that I wanted it to do or hoped it would achieve, I needed to get the generation of teachers that had come before me
Mm,
to bless the book, basically.
yeah.
To give it their blessing and because I knew it was a bit different and I knew it was going to be a bit
Mm,
slightly
yes.
challenging. Um, I think reading this book, if you know about psychosynthesis, it will be a disidentification experience.
Hmm. Yeah. An
One of one
invitation. Yeah, an invitation to yeah.
to
Go on.
yeah
Sorry.
to just to think through what is
Hmm.
psychosynthesis, to
Yeah.
become aware of some of its assumptions, maybe what it takes for granted, and alternative ways of thinking about it. One of my favorite responses, a reader said to me that they were finding reading the book quite trippy, which I thought was just a wonderful description of
Yeah.
there's something familiar about it, but also there's something a bit strange about it. It's that which is that, and that's what disidentification is. I think
Yeah.
you're like, oh, this is familiar but different. So it's this kind of slowed down, trippy disidentification experience, and
I yeah.
that's why I got Molly, and in the
Mhm.
endorsements, Diana Whitmore's in there, Piero Fiucci, Petra's in there, um, and
And I think trip is a great compliment because lots of things we do in psychosynthesis is to connect with self to get us to take all the noise, not all, but take out the noise and connect with self. And if you think about people choose shamanic um, um, healing as well, plant medicine to trip, to have that
right.
connection, to say that your book is trippy is a great compliment. Yeah, yeah,
It's a
I really
psychedelic
agree.
trip reading the book. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't need
So
drinks, just read the book. Mhm.
about the book, first I want to ask you about the cover, the
Mm.
portrait of a young woman, which is yeah. Would you tell us about why? What's the story? And yeah, you had to ask permission from the
The
museum.
Rijksmuseum in
Yeah,
Amsterdam, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
yeah.
The story behind the cover is,
Mm-hmm.
well, originally I wanted the cover to be a portrait of a Saggioli.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first idea, and I enjoyed that idea for quite some time. And I had a plan to commission a new portrait of a Saggioli for the cover. But in the writing of the book, I realized that it's not a book about a
Mm.
Saggioli. It's
Yeah,
a book about psychosynthesis. I mean, he's very much a character in the book. And
yeah.
if you read the book, he will become like he did to me in the writing process, he will become a bit of a presence in your life. You'll get to know his voice.
Mm.
But I thought if I put him on the cover, it would suggest, or
It was
you
about
can't
him. Yeah,
judge a book by its cover.
yeah,
Or it's okay to do that. How else do you decide one? How,
yeah,
there's thousands of books
yeah,
in the bookshop. You have to go by the cover.
yeah. We do. Yeah.
So then I moved towards the journey to the current cover, and I wanted a painting. My previous book also has a painting on the cover, and I wanted a painting because a painting, as opposed to a photograph, is there's something about the craft of a painter and
Mm.
how that is an act of
Yeah.
imagination. I
Yeah.
understand a photograph could be as well, but I like the dreaminess of a painting. So that's the first respect of connection to the title. A painting is an
Mhm.
act of imagination. So someone
Yeah.
has painted this young woman. Also in the gazing at the cover,
Yes.
that
I was
that
gonna
that
comment about
as
that.
we look at the painting, that is
Hmm.
also an act of imagination. And we will all imagine the woman on the cover slightly differently. We will all see
Yeah.
her in a
Yeah.
slightly different way. We will have a story about who she is and her life and where she lives.
Yeah. Looking at you.
Um, so already, before you open the cover, your imagination is being
Yeah.
invited to come alive.
Yeah. Mm.
And then thirdly and lastly, she is looking out from the book at you. The previous book I wrote that you only saw the back of the head of the person in the painting, but this time I wanted the 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 subject of the painting to be looking out to the reader because she's imagining who you are while you're imagining
It
who
was
she
one way
is.
to see. Or I was thinking that she's inviting you, come with me.
Yeah,
See, yeah. Yeah.
she's wondering about who you are,
Mm.
and that's a thread that runs all the way through the book
Mhm.
because one of Assagioli's principles is that psychological life tends to personify itself. So he talks about a tendency in psychological life to perceive persons. So, for example, we dream, we see persons, we meet characters. And he draws upon that, and I certainly make quite a bit out of that in the book. I think it's the experiential underbelly of what's often spoken about as subpersonality work, which does work with imagined characters. But I kind of leave that to the side and talk about personifications. So, for all these different reasons, that's the cover we came up with. It was designed by Thierry, the publisher at Transpersonal Press. He did a really good job.
Yeah. No, it's a lovely
We
cover.
did it's not we did doctor the painting. It has been brightened up a little bit. We gave her a bit of lippy and
Oh.
blusher. And she was a bit drab. So we brightened her up a bit. We brought her into
Yeah.
the 21st century.
No. Lovely. I'm also curious, you mentioned about Sajali's presence during the writing process. So if you could talk a little bit about that and your process of writing the book. Mm.
Yeah, well, Where to start with that? I didn't plan to write this book. Um, After my first book, I set off writing a quite other book, and I had lots of material and ideas, and I was writing this other book.
Mm.
Um, but perhaps in a way that speaks to the spontaneity and the unpredictableness of
Mhm.
psychosynthesis. You never know what's going to happen next.
Mm.
Um, I just had an experience one day. I was with colleagues, and I had a little epiphany, which is a
Mhm.
nice word for an insight. The sky opened up, there was trumpets and angels. No, it's quite a sort of ordinary experience, but I had a little aha moment, and the thought that went alongside it was that if psychosynthesis is anything, it's alive and well here amongst my
Mm.
colleagues in this room, and we're doing it together. So I had this insight that psychosynthesis was something you do,
Mm.
and even though my colleagues perhaps understood it more or less
Mhm.
differently and expressed it in slightly different ways and drew upon different influences, there was something that was holding them together that was recognizable that they were doing that you could call psychosynthesis.
Mhm.
So I went off to write that down and I was going to write an essay about it. And then that turned into a series of essays. So it
Mm.
still wasn't a book. And then it became a plan for a short book. And I pitched that to my publisher, and he said, okay, go. And then it turned into a much, much longer book, longer than my first book. But in the writing of the book, I had to sit down every day and read Assagioli's works in English. I mean, he did write in English, but also
Mm.
his stuff's been translated into English. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of psychosynthesis materials in Italian and not being translated into English, and
Mhm.
vice versa. So it'd be nice if my book got translated into Italian one day. So because you're reading a Saggioli every day, and I would write
Mm.
every morning for 2 or 3 hours,
Mm.
that lasted for 2 years or more. And because you're thinking about what he said and piecing together different things of what he
Mhm.
said, then it's probably no surprise that the main figure that came to me during the writing of the book was a Saggioli. And it felt to me, certainly by the end of the process, that he was, I mean, we're sitting at the
Mm.
desk where I wrote the book. And it was like he was sitting at the end of the desk. Um, in imagination, dear viewer, don't worry, I'm not completely Lara. But he was a presence, a
Mm.
non-physical but nevertheless real presence at the end of the desk, and he became a very smiley and laughing and delighted presence. He was almost
Mm.
joking with me, and I felt like I was, I mean, this is a bit embarrassing, but I felt like I was being blessed by a
I love
Saggioli. I
it.
was being blessed by a
Yeah,
Saggioli now,
I hear that. Yeah.
not just by
Yeah.
his early students, but I felt imaginatively that a Saggioli was saying, go for it. Because I started the project feeling anxious, feeling a bit worried what might happen when the book got published because I started in a kind of grumpy or critical frame of
Mm.
mind. There were definitely things about Saggio's teachings that I wanted to critique. But the beautiful thing about this slowed down reflective process of writing a book is that you start to learn things and you start to, it's one thing having an idea about what you're going to write, but
Yeah.
then when you sit down to write it, you
Mm.
realize there's so many gaps. And as you fill in these gaps and connections come to you, and that's the creative process that is just wonderful. You wake up in
Mm.
the morning with a new idea, with a new understanding. I realized that alongside what I wanted to critique, there was also quite a lot of material that was saying the same kind of things that I was going to be
Yeah.
saying, but in a Sagioli's voice. And I'd kind of like not noticed it properly or kind of overlooked it or it had not been pointed out to me. And in the end, the book became a sort of dialogue between two Sagiolis. So there was a sort of psychoanalytical inspired conceptual Assagioli, a slightly more
Mm.
abstract description of psychosynthesis, using the lexicon of the unconscious, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was another Assagioli who was much more the experiential side, a much more descriptive, less
Mm-hmm.
abstract description of psychosynthesis. On the one hand, there's quite strong mechanical metaphors, and on the other side, this experiential side, there was much more sort of ecological metaphors
Yeah.
from biology, and um, and that became interesting. It was almost like I was getting Assagioli to talk to himself,
Yeah.
because it seemed to me that people might think, and this is the difference in my book, I think, to a lot of other books on psychosynthesis. I'm really shining a light on the fact that Assagioli's presentation isn't a unified system.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he wrote throughout a long life,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and he was influenced by all sorts of different things. He's got two books, but also many, many essays and lectures and dialogues that have been written down, conversations, letters. So he says different things at different times, and they don't always add up or join up together.
Yeah.
But often psychosynthesis gets presented as this is what psychosynthesis is, this is what Assagioli says. Um, but I wanted to sort of step back from that and say, well, he says a lot of things. Let's try and because I think the elusiveness of psychosynthesis is partly because it isn't a unified system, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But when you
Mm.
say one thing and don't point out that it's different
Yeah.
to what you say over here, that can be very confusing to students and people. So I just really pulled that out,
Yeah.
and I think that's why by the end of the book he was quite smiley, because I think I
Mm.
released Assagioli from the constraints, if you like, of an empirical science
Mm.
and or a narrow understanding of empirical science, and also the constraints of a sort of narrow psychoanalytical framework. And when you step out of those frameworks, psychosynthesis, I think, can really take off with a
Mm.
lot of its potential and fullness. So yeah, that was a long answer, but basically, Assagioli was
Um,
smiling.
yeah, there are lots of things I'm with. So one of them being right at the beginning of you talking about this your the act of will when you had that aha moment and just letting it brew, but also taking actions and allowing your curiosity to guide you into from that initial aha moment and also what I when you were talking about his presence, I was with the a meditation, a Buddhist meditation about meditating on the guru. I don't know if you're familiar. I'm not a Buddhist,
Yes,
but
yes.
yeah.
Mhm.
So it just really connecting
I
with your
think
teachers or your
the
guru
act of
and
will is an interesting one,
mm,
particularly in the sense that I didn't plan to write the book, and even
hmm
when I did start writing, it wasn't a book; it was just an essay, and it felt like something I had to do.
hmm
I mean, I tried for a long time. I resisted writing on psychosynthesis because I didn't think I had anything particularly new to say, and but it after this little epiphany that I told you about,
yeah
it felt like I needed to work that out and flesh that out. And then it became very satisfying to be writing on psychosynthesis. It felt like the right thing to do. And and then your will is like so
mm,
it's like because
yeah
the will isn't about making something happen. It's more like you're guiding or directing a process
mm.
that you're not completely in charge of. It's like
But
when
yeah
you kind of find where the process wants to go, a lot of
mm,
stuff can happen.
mm. But I
Um,
also hear that you're taking the space. You block those 2.5, 3 hours every day to write. There was the in that sense the act of will had that discipline, which is very important because you know I was going to ask you your tips or advice about how to get the work done. You know, because lots of people
uh,
think about writing a book, but this very practical steps as well. You have to be committed and have that act of will to make space and make things happen.
Sure. Um,
Mm.
yeah, tips on writing. I think, yeah, I mean, I don't see it as an act of will in that sense.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean,
But
you
you
do,
already
you
an
don't
author.
you?
It's not something that you're doing for the first time, and it's so.
Yeah.
I hear that is perhaps this one was a little bit out of your comfort zone because you were challenging ideas,
Well, the
and you're
first one
doing
was as
something.
well.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't
I
read
think,
the
I
first
think,
one yet, but it's on my list. Yes.
I think,
So
I
yeah.
think to write a book, it will take you out your comfort zone. Any kind of
Hmm.
creative project
Yeah,
will
if
take
you're
you out of
writing
your
a book
comfort
on
zone.
the people pleaser, identified with your people pleaser's sub-personality, you
Well,
won't be doing it. Yeah.
if you're going to learn something, you need
Mm,
to you're going from the known into the unknown. You're writing into the unknown, or to put it in a better way, you're living in the mystery of where
mm,
the book's going to take you, and you're
yeah.
excited about where that might be. That's what that's what keeps you going when it
Mm,
gets hard. Um, what I've learned is to understand that it doesn't come easily or immediately or quickly.
mm,
So the really
yeah.
important thing is to understand that it takes time and not to put pressure on yourself, um, because that sort of perfectionism or need to get to the end,
Mm,
I mean, I write about this in the book. It's the same applies to just like an hour of a therapy session. It's the
yeah.
pressure to come up with an outcome, a result, an insight, and an interpretation that gets in the way of the work. And
Yeah.
for me, it's about looking after the process. So whether you're writing a book or being a therapist
Yeah.
or a mother or a school teacher or looking after
Yeah.
your dog, it's the you're attending to the process conditions that need to be in place to allow whatever it is you're trying to give
Mm,
birth to grow and develop. And for me, that was, a regular time and an undistracted time as best
mm,
possible.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
where I could return to the project and just move it forward a little bit each day. And then also recognizing that when you're writing doesn't just happen when you're writing at the screen or on the
Mm,
page. You're writing
exactly.
all the time. Writing's so you'll have good ideas, you'll have plans, you'll have inspirations all over the place. And the important thing is to capture them at the time and write them down.
Yeah.
And then when you
Yeah.
get some time to be like in front of your screen or your page, you can develop them. But I think in the same way that when you read a novel, the novel's with you when you close the book and you're
Yeah.
with those
Yeah.
characters for the rest of the day and they give you courage or whatever. Um, Same with writing.
Mm, yeah.
It's a 24/7 project. It does rather take over your life.
It does. Yeah. I remember reading that your wife commented like you more than your book or you're not your book because
Yeah,
you're
that was
speaking.
towards
Yeah.
the end when we were editing the book, which is a very
Mm,
stressful time because
mm.
you're obviously identified with the manuscript because you spent
Yeah.
2 years lovingly creating this thing, and then you hand it over to an editor who moves your words around,
Mm.
and and and
Mm,
and
yeah. Your
sometimes that
baby. You
sometimes
just gave
sometimes
birth.
Sometimes that improves things, but also it is a collaboration with the editor
Yeah.
because they don't
Yeah.
quite understand the meaning sometimes of the
Yes. Yeah.
sentences and you need to fix them back again. And that was a very stressful time. And that's when
Yeah.
my wife said, you're more than your book. And that was funny. That was a sort of spontaneous
Yeah.
disidentification.
Yeah.
When I finally sent the completed manuscript off, I had I heard a voice and it said to me, what was that all about? And it was really funny because for two plus years, the most important thing in my life was to write this book and
Hmm.
publish this book. And then as soon as it's finished, it was just like, what was that all about?
Mm.
Wow. And it was like a sense of sort of waking up and moving on. And that's the disidentification. And now there's a new
Yeah.
project. And now I'm a different person and I'm facing into a new challenge or a new opportunity. That's
Yeah.
psychosynthesis. It's the heartbeat
Yeah.
of psychosynthesis is
Yeah.
identification, disidentification, identification, Disidentification. Identification is not wrong. It's just that when
Yeah,
it outlasts its usefulness or purpose
yeah, I
and
love that.
doesn't allow you to lean into new opportunities, that you need to disidentify. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm aware of the time, and we still haven't gotten to the nectar of the book, the act of imagination. How, if you can tell us without too much spoilers, so people can get the book, please get the book. There will be the links for on the description of this
Mm.
channel, this chap. Oh, this episode, there will be the link where to get the book and also where people can find you. But before we talk about that, I would like to hear what is the act of imagination, what the book is about really, and
Mm.
how it is related to yeah, well, with your clients, for example, in your therapy room.
Sure.
That's a
So,
three questions in one. Sorry, you
no,
pick
that's
what you
fine.
want.
So, the act of imagination is the title, and the strap line on the back of the book is therapy is a time between stories, a
Mm,
slow reimagining of self and world. Therapy is a time between stories, a slow reimagining of self and world. So, particularly in chapter 2 and 4, there's only four
mm,
chapters. I really like dive into the image-based
mm,
approach of psychosynthesis. And I go beyond the conventional application of maybe scripted visualizations or guided imagery journeys or set piece techniques,
mhm,
of which there are many in psychosynthesis. But I get behind them to the principles of what is imagination and how does
mm,
imagination help us to psychosynthesize. Because I think a narrow understanding of imagination is the assumption that it's somehow to do with sort of mental pictures inside your mind that are somehow
mm,
separated from
mm,
the objective world. And that's why Assagioli tends to talk about an inner imagination, inner dialogue, inner child. I go beyond that and I talk about imagination in a much broader and again an experiential way.
mhm,
Because all these techniques in psychosynthesis rely upon the activity of imagery in the world. So if you're doing a drawing,
mhm,
sometimes you get asked to do a drawing when you're a client by your psychosynthesis therapist. Obviously, you're imagining on the page. That's not in your mind. That's or
mhm,
when you maybe you do a dialogue with an imagined person on a chair. You do some chair work.
mhm,
Again, that's an imagined person that appears in the room, like Asagioli did to me at the end of the desk.
mm,
um, or in the transference relationship, how the client pictures and perceives and understands the therapist. That's an act of imagination.
mhm,
So what I do is I talk about how clients are in a story identification. So identification is quite a big idea. We've mentioned it
mhm,
briefly already, but in psychosynthesis, identification would be a restricted sense of self, a habitual sense of self. Normally, that's spoken about as a restricted range of feelings and thoughts and sensations, body, feelings, mind. What I talk about as a story identification would include that, but also add to it how you see the world
mhm,
and how you act in the world, perceptions and actions. Because we're always imagining, and imagination is what allows us to create meaning and understand where we are. But it's also, if when it's impoverished or lacking, imagination will filter out other
mm,
possible meanings or a larger story. And when people come to therapy, how I understand that is that a new experience, some unexpected character, person,
mm,
or an unexpected experience like depression or anxiety, or an unexpected event like, I don't know, the COVID lockdown or something like that, or a bereavement,
mm,
or a breakup, or you lose your job. Something's happened that their story doesn't help them to understand.
Mm.
It interrupts the story of how they see themselves and the world. So for me, therapy is about helping people to understand, to recognize the story that they have been telling and how that's not adequate at the moment,
Mm.
and to cultivate the imaginative potential or ability to begin to notice
Mm-hmm.
the new story that is already
Mm-hmm.
trying to emerge or be
Yeah.
born in the person's life. You can't force a person into a new story. That's not a good idea. But you can help people to recognize the new story
Mm.
that's emerging. So there will be, you know,
Yeah.
atypical feelings or thoughts or behaviors at the edges, and then you can weave
Mm.
that into a new story. So, and I just slow that down and I give
Yeah.
transcripts and case studies on what that would mean in the consulting room. Um, so yeah, for me, therapy's a way to help people imagine more
Yeah.
fully. So it's like often we think about imagination as maybe a problem. You have a fantasy life, a
Mhm.
subjective fantasy. You're stuck in a fantasy life, and
And
we
and
need
we
to,
stop playing. We stop. Sorry,
yeah,
and we stop playing with imagination when we grow up. Like, you have
yes,
to behave in a certain way. But I find it what you describing. I can relate in many ways, and seeing clients as well how it's an invitation for them to step into that world. But I was relating mostly to my journey as a trainee and now as a therapist. And you talk about that right at the beginning of the book, that about this is not the truth. We come
yeah,
with our
yeah.
fixed concepts, or this is going to answer all the questions I have, or is this the right path? And then we
Mm.
gently invited to drop those ideas and allow ourselves to enter the unknown and explore and play with imagination and yeah, it's
I mean, that's a good point because I think a lot of the book is talking through how we imagine
mm,
psychosynthesis
hmm
and
yeah,
the metaphors that we
yeah,
use in the psychosynthesis theory to understand psychological experience.
mm,
And that's the trippy thing that I was talking about earlier,
yeah,
because when you sort of highlight that there are these metaphors like lower, middle, higher,
hmm
or the unconscious, that's a metaphor. There isn't actually a place. No one's been to the unconscious and come back with holiday photographs.
mm,
Um, no one's actually like moved into the higher
mm,
unconscious. It's a story.
hmm
Um, another story would be the idea of the personal self, the I, as a center of consciousness and will. Again, that's a story. It's a
yeah,
metaphor.
yeah,
It's that's essentially drawn upon, the scientist, the
hmm
objective
yeah,
observer
and
who stands back and notices the world.
yeah,
He directly transposes that over into how he talks about psychosynthesis, which is useful and not wrong,
yeah,
and also can become a problem
yeah.
when we forget that it's just a story.
Yeah, and also just for the people who may not follow what you're talking about, you're referring to the egg diagram, Sajoli's egg diagram, which is a map of the psyche. But Sajoli says it himself that this is not an ended product; it's just a an idea of what it
Yeah,
may be. It's not
yeah.
written in
I
stone.
quote
Yeah.
him at the end of the book. He's got two
Mm,
or three lines on his critique of the egg diagram, and I mean that's a good thing to bring in because I spent a lot of time in the writing of the book wondering if I should include the egg diagram,
mm,
because what I was doing in the book was to write a book on psychosynthesis that didn't need the egg diagram.
mm.
A lot of books on psychosynthesis begin with
With egg.
the egg
Mm-hmm.
diagram and they explain the egg diagram and all the different points and regions in it. and somehow convey or imply that that means that's you now know what psychosynthesis is.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always felt a bit frustrated or let down by that because I think what that means is you understand the egg diagram,
Yeah.
um, which isn't necessarily the same as understanding what psychosynthesis is.
Mm,
So I deliberately avoided the egg diagram so that I could speak to the experience of psychosynthesis without getting into this abstract map
mm,
too quickly. But I did mention it at the end by way of saying that I was aware that I hadn't included it. And at the end of the epilogue, where I emphasize the dynamic nature of psychosynthesis as an activity, it's something that you do. I bring in Sagioli's critique of the egg diagram, which is
hmm.
that he says it's the obvious disadvantage is that it's a static,
Yeah.
two-dimensional representation of
Yeah.
psychological life, which misses out on the dynamic aspect,
Yeah.
which is the most important aspect. So again, that was him smiling at me
Yeah.
and laughing at me,
Yeah.
at me being slightly mischievous
Mm,
and doing that trippy thing of not introducing psychosynthesis in the
yeah.
normal way using the egg diagram, which
Yeah.
forced me to do it in a different way. And hopefully that'll help people see it and experience it in a slightly
Yeah.
fresher way as well.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I recently wrote my thesis for the MA in psychosynthesis psychotherapy, and I was guided by my mentor that I had to include a chapter or subchapter with the egg diagram. So that was a requirement for not necessarily, but if I want to get a better grade, the egg diagram should be there. It was expected by me,
Well,
and
my
I
book's going to get
really
a
didn't
really
know where to.
slow. I'm going to get a really bad mark then from that person. Yeah.
And then yeah, there were some things you had to mention, such as the egg diagram, and so I struggled to where to place. I've done that sub chapter, and I thought, well, it was floating, so I have to find a place to it and try to
Mm,
tidy it, and it kind of worked, but it could be without, actually, because it wasn't the
yeah.
focus of my thesis.
The,
I wrote
the,
on the moral imperative,
uh,
and
yeah.
yeah, it was
I think that's interesting. I mean, there's pros and cons to any psychological
mm,
theory. The pros, why we have psychological theory, is that it helps us to notice and validate and work with psychological experience. And if we hold our theories lightly, as what
mm,
Assagioli calls a working hypothesis,
yeah,
which is what I write about in the book. So, psychosynthesis theory is a working hypothesis. It's not the truth. It's just a loose framework. Uh, and that allows us to take it tentatively and see if
yeah,
it's true. We can test it out in our
yeah,
experience. That's where it's helpful. Where the con is, the danger
mm, mm,
is that we forget that it's just a working hypothesis.
yeah,
And then we move
yeah,
away from the adventure. It becomes a bit of a tragedy because then what we do, and I write about this very early on in the book, which is what I'm trying to avoid, is that we try to fit our experience into the theory,
yeah,
um, which is like topsy-turvy to me. It's because because the theory is always a simplification.
mm,
Experience is complex, it's
mhm,
mysterious, you can't tie it down.
yeah, yeah,
All
and
theories are generic and simplifications. So if you're trying to map it over too closely and fit yourself into the theory, you can end up living in a kind of abstract. Like I know a lot of people go around and they're thinking about what subpersonality am I in now. You know that's fine if you want to do that some of the time, but if you end up doing that a lot, then what
where is your
you're in your
authenticity? Yeah,
subpersonality that's
yeah,
obsessed about subpersonality.
exactly. Yeah, you stop your authentic
You're just not living.
self
You're not
too.
living your life. You know,
Yeah,
you're thinking about your
yeah.
life.
And on what you're saying about this, also, I remember that on the book you challenge the concepts, like, of psychosynthesis as concepts, and remind us that Assagioli referred to them as experience, leaving it for us to create. upon it.
Yeah, I
And
mean that's
yeah.
a good point to mention as well.
Mm.
There's a famous framework called the Seven Core Concepts of
Hmm.
Psychosynthesis Training, originally published by Furman and Gila. Kenneth
Hmm.
Sorensen's got a whole book that draws upon that core concepts framework as well.
But I'll tell you, I met Kenneth in the
Oh yeah,
summer school
oh,
this last week, and
oh,
even him is changing the language where he's referring to it as experiences now.
I noticed
Yeah,
he's doing that now. Yeah, that's good.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Which
because
is yeah.
because the original paper that Furman and Gila draw upon, which is a little, very short paper by Sajuli called Training that he wrote towards the end of his life. And it gives 12 points
Mm,
that you would want to look out for to recognize a psychosynthesis training. But it's also a good list of points
hmm.
to think about what is psychosynthesis. And in the second point, he lists 7 experiences that he says are the sine qua non, or like the essence of psychosynthesis. But Furman and Gila, they quote the sine qua non bit, but they talk about them as concepts, and I think that's really unfortunate. I mean, it's a great paper that they've written,
Hmm.
but because they've called these experiences concepts, that moves psychosynthesis theory
Yeah.
towards a kind of conceptual emphasis. And then because for me, what's important is how do we join these ideas, these theories, to the experience? Well, my beginning point is
Yeah.
recognizing that they are experiences to begin with. Disidentification, personal self,
Hmm.
will, ideal model, superconscious, synthesis, transpersonal self, these are experiences. And they're not even different experiences, they're different
They are
aspects
all
of
yeah.
the same experience. Your experience is
Yeah,
whole,
they're all.
and these are different ways in to help you understand. They're all joined up to each other, and Assagioli talks about how they're all linked together, and it's
Hmm.
in noticing how they're interrelated and not separate. Separation is the opposite of synthesis, that we deepen our
That's a,
understanding.
that's a perfect point. Yes, that's a perfect reminder. Separation is the opposite of synthesis. Yeah.
And I think going back to the egg diagram, that's one of the issues
Mm,
I have. It separates out these experiences, and you think, oh, that's the transpersonal self there and the personal self there.
yeah.
It makes you think they're
And
two
we
separate.
go. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're not at all separate at all,
Mm,
experientially.
mm. That's great. Yes, I'm aware of the time. It was, yeah, lovely talking to you, Alan. We could, yeah, we're going to meet again and we're going to talk. We have another episode booked already, so
We'll be back.
we'll be back. And yeah, do get the book. The link will be on the description on this episode. And what are you offering these days, and where can people find you, Alan?
Thank you. Well, I teach at the
Hmm.
Psychosynthesis Trust,
Hmm.
so I do a lot of there, and I sometimes do CPT events outside the main program, and also you can find about those and other things that I do at my website, which is one word, all lowercase, wildimagination.uk. I do workshops. I've got an annual online course based on my
Hmm.
first book, Waking Dreams, which is quite a nice. It's 10 sessions fortnightly. It's February through to May, June. Working through the book, watching me
So
do.
it's not recording, it's actually a
No,
course that you do live. Yeah.
it's a live Zoom
Hmm.
workshop space where I do demonstrations and then there's practicums and we talk
Hmm.
through the ideas. And at the moment, I'm writing a new course, which I can announce on your channel for the first time, which I'm hoping will come out sometime next year. I'm writing
Mm.
about fiction therapy.
Mm.
One of the things that's always obsessed me is that the question, why do you feel better when you're reading a novel? What is it
Mm.
about fiction that is therapeutic? And how can we read better? And how can we carry that over, that magic of carrying it over into your life? So I'm
Hmm.
interested in bibliotherapy or fiction therapy, which is a bit of a boring discipline, to be honest, where they kind of like, you're depressed, read a book about this depressed person.
Mm.
For me, I'm more interested in what is reading? What is the mystery
Yeah.
between you and the novel?
Yeah.
And
But it's
that's an
yeah.
act of imagination, right?
But it's so interesting because it's more that it can be more than fiction therapy as well. When we talked previously about what helps you to become an author, to become a writer. And we touched on reading. First of all, you got to be a good
Yes.
reader. And I
Yes.
remember I mentioned to you that I'm reading the biography of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who is
Nice.
one of my favorite novelists from, yeah. And 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 he talks about reading all sorts of book, everything he could get on his hands, from, being delighted when he as a teen read Kafka or Dostoevsky, and you just, in my mind I thought Gabriel Garcia Marquez just happened to be him, but no, he, like a Sagioli, had influences from his pre yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that in because I think if you want to write, you need to read. I think a lot of people
Hmm.
want to write, but they don't read.
No.
And that
Yes,
always
yeah,
strikes me as strange. It's like,
it's a big.
but I think if you're struggling to write,
Mm,
the first thing you can
yeah,
do to help you is to
yeah,
read more. And Gabriel Garcia Marquez or Sagioli, they were shaped by their reading. They
yeah.
became who they are
Yes,
in large part because
their
of
curiosity.
what
Mm,
reading does to you. It's not
yeah,
like you just learn things. It's like the material enters into you and you become a
yeah.
product, if you like, of all the dialogue that you've had with all these
Mm,
writers. You're
yeah.
communicating with the ghosts of these authors, and they're influencing you and shaping how you see the world and giving you possibilities that you didn't have before. And then that just gets squared when you start to write yourself, because that's like a deepening of that process.
So really, let's keep an eye on this course for next year. I'll try to be in. I'll keep an eye, and I'd love to do it. Be
Yeah, that'd
good,
be great.
good, lovely way to connect. And thank you so much, Alan.
Thank you, Lara. Really cool.
Thank you.